This is the Stihl MS181. Quite a nice little chainsaw. Very easy to start. They always clog up a bit inside the case where the chain runs around, so I just tend to give it a bit of a clean out. When you're cleaning your chainsaw, a couple of the things to remember are the little holes. This little hole up here, and on the reverse, this little hole here. Now, if they get blocked, they stop the oil going through that hole and then onto the chain. There's a tiny little oiler that pumps out oil here, and that lines up with this little hole. Of course, if that hole's blocked with all the gunk, the chain will no longer get lubricated. It will dry out and not be very good. So when you're ready to put the chainsaw back together, generally you would loosen up the tightening bolt just a bit so it's easier to tension. So the chains are directional, the teeth facing that direction as it's cutting. So quite often people will put them on the wrong way, which is not too clever. So once you've got the chain on the bar, you can line it up. You get the teeth of the chain around the cog at the back. Line the bar up with the hole, and then put the case bit back on the nut. And as you can see, the chain's all quite loose, so we need to tighten that up, and the way to do that is just to use the little tensioner down. And it's good to have it reasonably tight, but you don't want it too tight. It doesn't move freely. So that's about the tightness you want it. Give it a little bit more. Make sure it moves freely like that. And then tighten. Now obviously with the heat when it's running, it may loosen off a bit. I have seen chains loosen off quite a lot. So after a little while, just give it a quick check. Make sure it's not too loose and too sagging. That may be about right. Bearing in mind it will get a little bit warm and probably will stretch just a little bit when it's hot. So starting these chainsaws, that's a brake when you heard that click. So the chain will now no longer move, and the engine can overpower that. But for the most part, it will stop the chain. But bearing in mind, it's not always fail-safe. Now to start these Stihl chainsaws, they're quite a good chainsaw, quite easy to start. The MS181. Now what you have to do, you have to pull that down, pull the trigger up, and put it on full choke. Let go of these two. So now that's on full choke, what you would do is give it a couple of pulls, and it will go to fire and then stop. Now when it goes to fire, it's important that you don't just keep pulling, because that will flood the engine and you will not start it. What you have to do is just put it on half choke. Once it's on half choke, you can then pull it, maybe 1 or 2 pulls, and it will start. And then when you throttle it, it automatically takes it off half choke and just puts it to the on position. And then you can obviously take the brake off and do your job. I'll give that a go now and see if we can give it started. I have used this in the last hour, so it may not need full choke, but we'll give it a go for demonstration purposes. So fully on, full choke. So almost started there. Half choke. Now you can see that's warmed up a bit now. It's just ever so slightly looser, runs ever so slightly freer, but it's still well and truly on there. So that's a good tension just there. No sag at the bottom. Now to check the oil is working, when you run it like that for a little while, you will see, if you put it against like a bit of cardboard at the back, you will see splashes, little dots of oil hitting the back of it. And you can see down here where the oil has left a little streak of oil, so we know the oil's working. You can also see it's quite wet. The newer ones come with these quick release caps, which are great. So the older ones, you used to need the tool, you used to need the spanner to turn it, but now nice little lift cap, just like that. The fuel mix is 50:1 on this particular model. So you mix unleaded fuel, you get 2-stroke oil, mix 50 parts fuel to 1 part 2-stroke oil, and that goes straight in the tank there. Now this side is the train oil. It's quite a gloopy sort of oil. You shouldn't really use regular oil, although plenty of people have, but it's kind of stringy. It creates this stringy effect. I don't know if you can see that. So the air filter on these have got a quick release at the back, comes down like that. You can then lift out the case. These air filters are just like clips, one there, one there. So all in one piece. Now they're replaceable, obviously. Quite easy to put back on. Spark plug in there if you ever need to change it. So a great little tool, nice and easy to use. These just sort of slot in the back. Once it's slotted in, it just goes back on like that. So this is a close-up of the starting functions. So like I say, that's on. Then you've got half choke and then full choke. Now you can't get it on choke. It won't go down, you'll end up breaking it. What you have to do is pull the trigger in and then pull it down. It's quite firm. So that's full choke. And as I say, when you pull it a couple of times, it almost goes to start but then stops. That's when you must bring this up one. And then it's on the half choke. And then give it a few more pulls, it'll start. And then when you press this trigger in, it just puts it on, so it takes the choke completely off. And away you go. So this is the correct way of putting the chain on. Now when sharpening these, they're quite easy to sharpen really. You can tell when they need sharpening because you start to get more of a sawdust than little wood chips. Wood chips, little fine wood chips is what you get when it's sharp. Something like that. But it's more of a... If you start getting to the powder, then really you should have sharpened your chain a long time ago. But you tend to find in the very end, you find a little dink where it's gone. And it's really the cutting point here. That little point now is what actually cuts. So when you see that point gone, just give it a little sharpen. Now some chainsaws have not been sharpened in ages, and what you find is that it's chipped all the way back. And in that case, what you really need to do is take the tooth all the way back to where you get the sharp point again. Now obviously the line here is the maximum sharpening on it. That's the depth gauge. Now as you sharpen it, this is obviously tilted backwards, so it gets lower and lower and lower, the tip of it. Now if this becomes higher than the tip of this, then it's not going to cut very well, because this is keeping the cutting tooth away from the wood. So every so often you'll need to just take this down a little bit, and you can get guides for taking them down, or you can get an electric one to do it. One last thing with the chainsaw that I can think of at the moment is that when you're cutting, obviously you want to cut with this to this area. When you start getting around to here, it can cause problems, especially this quarter here. Because what's happening is the chain's going round and round and round really fast, If this all of a sudden catches something, say like a metal spike or something buried in the tree or an owl or something, what can happen is it can flick the chainsaw up. And what it will do is, quite violently, it will flick the chainsaw up into your face. Now this is what the brake's for here. It's designed to come on and slow the chain down and hopefully stop it. It takes your hand away from the throttle, so that also disengages it. It's designed to stop it instead of going into your face at full speed, and you can imagine the consequences. So that's the primary function of the brake, really, the safety brake. So I'd recommend not cutting with this part at all. And certainly don't plunge it into wood, because it will just run up and then hit you. Now the safety gear for these is very useful because it will help stop you losing a limb potentially, or even more. They're designed with a special fibre in them that will literally bind up the chain and stop it. So I highly recommend you wear them. If you're anything like me, who's got no real fear of these things, putting on the safety gear can just remind you to be careful. Fear is actually a good thing in some circumstances, and certainly on this is a very good thing, because if you've got fear, you're going to be careful of it. If you've got no fear, well, you're going to be a bit careless and you might make a mistake.